Welcome in, everyone, to Redacted on this Monday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores or sweeps under the rug or covers in a big pile of propaganda. So welcome into the big show. We've got a busy show for you on this Monday. Looks like NATO is agitating for war once again with major provocations against Russia. So we want to ask the question, who is running things inside the White House right now? Is it Kamala Harris? Is it President Biden? There's been a series of executive orders issued over the past couple of weeks. Who's actually signing those things? Does President Biden even know he's putting his signature on those executive orders? And by the way, these executive orders are very important. We're going to speak with Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who's going to be joining us here in moments to talk about that.
Plus, the Kamala Harris campaign is courting white votes, specifically by gender, white women, white men, but only if you can acknowledge your white privilege, then you can speak for the Kamala Harris campaign. We're going to look at these truly racist campaign moves by the Democrats, maybe because they realize that courting the black vote is not going well for them after, I don't know, decades of Democrats destroying black communities with their woke policies. So yeah, we got to go for the white people now. This is neo-racism. This is wild.
And if you go to Kamala Harris's campaign website, God forbid you do that, but if you do, she's selling hats, white dudes for Kamala. So you can actually buy your white dudes for Harris hats right now. She's literally selling those for $35.
I mean, is this what they want now? I mean, we do see like blacks for Trump, Jews for Trump, right? Do we want to segregate by skin color and promote the idea that your race or your gender or whatever leads you to monolithic thought? This seems like regressive to me. But what do you think?
With white text?
No, they're white hats. They're white hats. They're white hats. They really want to make sure that they know you're a white dude. You're a white dude for Harris.
Right. You have to think this way if your skin color is this way.
Also today on the show, we're going to talk about censorship because I don't know if you've noticed, but big tech has been censoring the 2024 election in earnest. Once President Biden announced he was resigning from the race, boom, holy smokes. Everything from Amazon to Google censorship to Facebook to Instagram all came out in support of the Democrats in this cause. We're going to go through all of the censorship that's been unfolding over the past few days. It's pretty astonishing.
Plus, the Paris Olympics are a great example of why green policies do not work when they are not accompanied by people who, I don't know, think it through. It's not just the offensive nature of the opening ceremony, but so much more than that. It's wild. It proves why the Paris Climate Accords are total crap because of these climate policies that just people seem not to think through. They think you're going to buy it because they say things like plant-based or carbon neutral. Yeah. And now you have all these miserable athletes. It's really a disgrace for them. So we're going to talk about that as well.
So welcome in. Let us know where you're joining us from on this Monday. Good to see all of you guys as we approach $35 trillion in national debt in the United States. Overnight, the Biden administration just approved another couple of $1 billion for Ukraine. So Ukraine getting some good money there because they definitely need those billions of dollars while America is crumbling. So good to see all of you guys. Let us know where you're joining us from around the country. We've got a lot of news to get to today, but first
we want to tell you about our friends over at American Financing, and we want to thank them for supporting Redacted, but they also want to support you in this tough economy with inflation raging out of control. And of course, in the last couple of years, you know how hard it is to meet your monthly expenses, your monthly housing expenses, food expenses, and if you're just resorting to putting that on a credit card, well, then your interest payments are just spiraling out of control. But there's a better way. With American Financing, if you're a homeowner, they will take all of the equity that you've built up and use it to pay off high interest debt. Now, I know people scare you about, oh, you shouldn't touch the equity in your home. Wealthy people never think like that. They think, what do I have to leverage in order to be able to build wealth in my house? They don't just hoard one asset. So you can think like the wealthy are taught to think too, and American Financing can teach you. They're saving their customers an average of $854 a month, and they can close in as fast as 10 days. Start today, and maybe you even delay 2 mortgage payments and then free up some cash for you and your family. So call them at 866-890-8434 or visit americanfinancing.net/redacted. One more time, that's americanfinancing.net/redacted.
Who's really running the executive branch of the United States government? Our next guest says we are witnessing the subversion of the office of the U.S. presidency. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but a number of executive orders have been signed over the past few weeks and months. Is it President Biden actually signing these executive orders? What are these executive orders doing other than subverting the power of the United States and taking away the power of the U.S. voter in the hand of some deep state oligarchs? Also, over the weekend, we saw a major escalation between the United States, NATO, and Russia. Are we barreling towards nuclear war? Our next guest is Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Welcome back to the show, Colonel. Great to see you.
Thanks. Happy to be here, Clay.
Well, it's my pleasure. Let's start with the presidency right now. We'll get to Russia and the major pieces of news over the weekend there, because that seems like it's all part of this deep state agenda. You've seen, as you've called out, a number of these executive orders that have been signed over the past few weeks. We see President Biden, of course, now stepping aside at the will of President Obama, calling for, with the use of the 25th Amendment, that he would be pushed out of office. In your experience, being in Washington, D.C., being inside the Pentagon, serving President Trump, who do you think is running the show inside of the White House right now? Is it President Biden?
No, I don't think it is. And there's precedent for this. Let me talk a little bit about what happened in the past and then talk specifically about President Biden's condition. President Woodrow Wilson suffered a stroke and was effectively incapable of exercising his powers as president, and his wife literally stepped into the vacuum and ran the federal government, ran the White House. Now, of course, she had a lot of help, and she was a smart woman, and she knew what her husband wanted, so it was not immediately obvious to everyone that Wilson was out of it, but he was effectively out of business as president of the United States. This is after World War I. So we've been through this before. The second time, I would argue, is when FDR was elected for his final term. He was effectively a dead man. And after he was inaugurated in 1945 in January, he lasted 60 days before dying. So he was effectively dead for all intents and purposes when he was elected. So there were people doing his business for him. We now know in retrospect that included people like Harry Hopkins and Harry Dexter White. Harry Dexter White was an NKVD agent working directly for Stalin. And we think Harry Hopkins probably was, at the very least, a knowing accomplice for Harry Dexter White. So they continued the destructive policies that led to the occupation of Eastern Europe and absolutely unconditional assistance to the Soviet Union, which made Stalin the real victor in the Second World War. So those are two examples we've been through before. It appears right now that President Biden hasn't really been in complete control of his faculties for some time. I recall an incident 2.5 years ago, and this was clearly an accident, and I don't know whether it was CNN or NBC or who was doing the filming at the time. But he was sitting at his desk and he was making some statements, and Kamala Harris stood immediately behind him, and someone put a document for his signature in front of him. I can't recall if that was an executive order or something else, but he looked down and he said, "Oh, what is this?" And she leaned over and she said, "Just sign it." And so he said, "Oh, yes." And he signed it. I think he's been signing away all sorts of things left and right, effectively a puppet for the people who are in Washington. And I think that was a design from the very beginning. This is an excessively old man who no longer had complete control of his faculties, someone that could be manipulated and pushed in the direction that they wanted to go. As little as I think of Biden, and as flawed a person as he is, I don't think that a younger Biden 20 years ago would have willfully or voluntarily signed off on most of these executive orders, because at least in his past, he demonstrated some devotion to the country and its integrity as a state. The things that he's been indulging in are things that are absolutely destructive to the United States, whether it's open borders, effectively talking about, allowing people to stay in this country in perpetuity by offering some form of amnesty, essentially disassembling our criminal justice system by releasing criminals onto the streets. You've got to go through all these executive orders. and look at the consequences of them. I really don't believe that the younger Biden would have done those things. So I think this has been going on for a long time, and this is why I argued strongly that he should be removed and replaced by someone who's actually competent. Now, we know that that means inevitably Kamala Harris. Whether or not we want to discuss her competency is another matter. But she at least has the presence of mind to understand the gravity of the situation. And we may eventually, before the convention even, or immediately after the convention, face a situation that we did with Richard Nixon, when Nixon, first of all, lost his vice president because his vice president, Spiro Agnew, was accused of tax evasion or something. He was removed, and we got Jerry Ford. Jerry Ford was picked because Jerry Ford threatened no one and hadn't particularly offended anybody throughout his entire career. He wasn't an especially bright person, but he filled the role as vice president. Then suddenly Nixon had to resign. So he had to move Jerry Ford up to the top slot, for which he really wasn't suited, and find a new vice president. That turned out to be Nelson Rockefeller. All of these things, all these nominees for vice president and president and so forth had to be approved by the Senate and the House. So we could see something like this unfold in the months ahead, because I really think that President Biden is non-compos mentis. He's beyond help right now. So he should be removed. I mean, it's elder abuse to keep him where he is.
Oh, it absolutely is elder abuse. And a new poll out this morning says that most Americans want Biden to resign right now. Get out now. I've long said I don't think he'll be president by November 5th. I think he'll have handed over the presidency to Kamala Harris. Right now, she's already taking security briefings. Effectively, seems like she's running the show. But really, in your experience, do you think it's the deep state, it's the permanent Washington that's running the show and forcing?
The question: who's in the White House? First of all,
right.
You've got Jake Sullivan. Jake Sullivan seems to be the architect of a lot of things. Now, he's got a lot of people to help him, people from outside the administration. A couple of years ago, I was told that George Soros routinely called the White House and actually called Jake Sullivan as well as the president to express his views. He's not the only one. I would love to get a hold of the White House phone log and see who's been talking to whom. I think that would be very illuminating, and it would be very frightening to most Americans. Those two in particular and their supportive staffs, you have to look at the makeup of those staffs, the composition. Who are these people? Where did they come from? And I think you're going to discover that these are committed, frankly, Marxists who see a future for the United States that most Americans would never devise. And they're trying to use the executive order powers and the subservience of Congress right now to whatever they want, for reasons that have a lot to do with corruption on the Hill, to exploit President Biden and push us in directions from which it's going to be difficult to recover. And I think that's what they're doing. The sort of irreversible momentum we used to hear about years ago, I think that's what they've tried to create. We're on a downhill slide at high speed into the abyss of Marxism, cultural Marxism, and all the values that go with that.
Yeah, opening our borders, continued moves to continue to allow illegal immigrants to pour across our borders, funneling additional money to Ukraine, funneling additional money to Israel. Today, we have NATO states telling citizens to leave Lebanon. Over the weekend, we've seen a major escalation in our proxy war against Russia. And it seems like, I know we talk about this, and I think people say that we're never going to get to a direct hot war with Russia. People can say this all they want. But over the weekend, I think we saw one of the largest escalations we've seen thus far. Can you talk about where we're heading with Russia while President Biden is really no longer president of the United States?
Well, remember that Biden made a number of statements starting in March of 2022 about so-called red lines. I, as president, will never permit this because it would lead to a global conflict with Russia. And that had to do with high-speed, modernized aircraft, strike missiles, strike systems that would bring us inevitably into collision with Russia because we would strike Russian soil. All of those red lines have been crossed. I don't think he knows what he's doing. And I begun to think that if the White House is a sanitarium, then the Hill is probably a madhouse, because you've got vast numbers of people who don't understand what war means, because we've had conflicts with so many weak opponents over the last 25, 30 years that we don't understand that Russia and China and Iran and other states like them actually dispose over considerable military power that can threaten us. In other words, that we're no longer invulnerable, invincible, and immune to attack, that they can reach us in the United States. So what happened over the weekend is particularly worrisome, because historically, the president, who is the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, is de facto also the leading political figure in NATO. And normally nothing would happen on the ground inside NATO, in any NATO country, militarily directed at anybody else, that the president would not be aware of. I mean, that certainly was my experience. I was on the Czechoslovak and East German borders back in the late 1970s. And at one point, we actually thought that the Soviets were about to launch an offensive. It turned out to be another feint where they move up towards the border, stop, turn around, and go back to their barracks. But I was on the border, and we were reporting what we were seeing, and those reports went all the way to Alexander Haig, who was the supreme commander at the time of Europe, SACEUR, in other words, the military commander-in-chief of NATO, and to the White House. In other words, you had soldiers at the time in the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, standing on the border, and I was in the 1st of the 1st Cavalry at that point. All these cavalry units perform border duty, which is why we need to get them back on the Mexican border. That's another subject. But we were at the time defending the East German and Czechoslovak borders. We were reporting these things. So I know that the command and control in NATO is eminently capable of controlling everything that happens from the Arctic Circle of the Finnish border all the way down to the Black Sea, where NATO's border with Romania and Bulgaria end. In other words, nothing can really happen there unless somebody knows about it in the White House. So over the weekend, we discovered that at least 2 or 3 drones, I'm told, were flown. Now, where were they flown from? We're assuming Finnish soil, because the target was about 200 kilometers east of Finland, up near the Arctic Circle on the Kola Peninsula, where the
now
Russians
a member of
have,
NATO.
Yeah, and Kola Peninsula is important because the Russians have strategic bombers located on the Kola Peninsula. And you go a little further, and they have their submarines, their strategic submarine arsenal. It's a very highly militarized area. All of a sudden, these drones appear out of nowhere, but we think they were flown from Finland. They managed to destroy a supersonic Tupolev bomber on the ground. Now, this is something that under normal circumstances, the Ukrainians, with what they've got, could never reach. You're talking about trying to fly something like that from Ukraine all the way up to the Arctic Circle, it would never make it. So we think it probably came from Finland. This now means that we have done something that the Russians have told us is a red line. We have actually permitted attacks to be launched from NATO soil, ostensibly by the Ukrainians. Now, how the Ukrainians got to Finland is incomprehensible to me. But again, that sort of thing is not going to happen without Washington knowing about it, certainly not without the CIA and MI6 in London knowing about it. And if you were president of the United States, Clayton, and somebody came to you and said, this is our plan, this is what we want to do, and you had any presence of mind, you would say, well, that's outrageous. That means we're at war with Russia. I don't want to do that. And Biden has said that repeatedly, yet this is exactly what we've done.
What do you think the response from Russia's side will be? Now, this is something Putin has said. This would be World War III. This is something that Dmitry Medvedev has said. This would be World War III. An attack from NATO soil would be a bridge too far. That would be a red line. Now, it seems like we've been bumping up against these red lines now for the past year or more.
I think President Putin knows that we are roughly 95, 96 days from the anticipated election in November. I think his preference would be to absorb the damage and wait to see whether or not there is a new administration in November that is likely to change policy. I think that's his preference. Putin is not an impulsive man. He's also not a dangerous, unbalanced maniac by any stretch of the imagination. This is a man who's bent over backwards to avoid war with the United States and NATO. He's taken a lot of abuse from us. He's put up with a lot of infractions, a lot of crossing of his red lines, but he wants desperately to avoid that war. We, on the other hand, have continually escalated and escalated and escalated. And this is now a very serious escalation. We're not talking about drones flown from within Ukraine by, say, British intelligence or American intelligence officers designed to strike targets in Crimea. That's different. You're flying from within the Ukrainian airspace and soil. This is now from a NATO country, ostensibly Finland. I don't think the Finns may be completely aware, and this is another problem. I think the Finns and the Swedes are now beginning to wake up slowly to the reality that they are now platforms for the projection of American military power against Russia. I don't think they necessarily signed up for that. What they were signing up for was protection from Russian attack. What they become, though, is this unsinkable aircraft carrier for U.S. forces against Russia. That's very dangerous because there is always the possibility that the Moscow decides, well, we're not going to attack all of NATO on this particular occasion because they can target everything along this 1,000-mile front, if you will. We'll just limit it to where we think this was flown from inside Finland. And I'm sure by now the Russians know where it came from or where the drones came from. They know what was used against them. I mean, this sort of thing you can't conceal once it's been done. And they could easily say, well, we're going to do this. Now, the reason for not doing it is, as I said before, Putin would prefer to wait for the outcome of the election and see whether or not it makes any difference. But he has every right to respond. The question is, what do we do? Are we going to be dumb enough to respond to that with more acts of war against Russia? Or are we going to step back and say, well, we pushed too far because a war with Russia is not what we want? I don't know, but when's the last time anybody discussed this with the American electorate?
I haven't heard any discussion of this from Kamala Harris. I haven't heard any discussion of this from President Biden. And I haven't heard anything from the White House podium on this. And so I think if we ask the American people, we can ask the American people right now, do you want a hot war with Russia? Do the Finnish people want a hot war with Russia? I'll ask our Finnish viewers who watch us on a regular basis. Let us know if you're up there near the Arctic Circle. Do you want to be wiped off the map because of Washington, D.C. and the NATO brass? Colonel, it's
before we leave this, I just want to make one quick note that we also have information that a series of ambushes were conducted against Russians in Central Africa. These are Wagner people. In other words, Russian mercenaries that came in and replaced us in countries where formerly we were operating, quote unquote, against Islamists. All of a sudden, with great success, far beyond the normal capabilities of the Islamists, there were attacks killing 50, 60 Russians in an ambush on the ground in Central Africa. Now, we've also discovered that they were being advised and assisted by Ukrainian forces. In other words, advisors from the Ukrainian military. This is another example of how far this war has gone and how dangerous it has become, because now the Ukrainians went to Central Africa, assisted the people that we previously were attacking because of their Islamist agenda, and they are now helping these Islamists kill Russians in an area of no strategic importance to Ukraine whatsoever. Again, could this happen without us knowing it? I rather doubt it. I once again, I think these Ukrainians are operating as surrogates for us. So if the Ukrainians can do that in Central Africa, in a place like Chad or Niger, or any of these countries where we were formerly operating, could they not also go to Finland and launch drone strikes against the Russians at a strategic air base and destroy a bomber? And I guess the answer is yes. All of this is very disturbing because it looks like an out of control operation. It's very similar to Stanley Kubrick's movie. It doesn't make any sense. Everything's out of control. Who the hell is in charge? I don't think Biden's in charge of anything. I'm not sure Kamala necessarily knows very much. Kamala Harris. Again, who's behind these people? And I hesitate to point to specific people and give you their names and say they're doing something because I don't know. I don't know what's going on in the White House. And now we know the Hill is certifiable. I mean, they're ready to underwrite a war against Iran on behalf of Israel. Again, is that something we Americans want to do? When's the last time that was debated openly and in public? Well, it's very hard to do that when the media is entirely on the side of the government in terms of its interest in waging global war everywhere we can. It's insane, and it's dangerous, and it's out of control.
It is Dr. Strangelove. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah.
And yeah, who is running the shop right now? Congress is on vacation. President Biden is, by all accounts, brain dead. It's weekend at Bernie's. And is it President Obama? President Obama, who set up shop and bought a house in Washington, D.C., the only president in 100 years to buy a house in Washington, D.C. When you leave Washington, you get out of Washington, D.C. So maybe it's President Obama running the show there. Unbelievable. And I think everything is changing in 24 hours spades right now. And I think I would be really surprised if President Biden remains president by November 5th of this year, but we'll see. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, always a voice of reason in a sea of madness right now. Thank you so much for joining us as always, Colonel. Great to see you.
Sure, thank you. Appreciate it, Clayton.
Thanks so much, Colonel. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think that President Biden will remain in power as the president of the United States, or will he resign ahead of the 2024 election on November 5th, or will he continue? I mean, I just don't see him continuing. If
and will voters realize the way that they're being manipulated? Now, over the weekend, Clayton and I were watching the Twitter feed of Black Lives Matter, and they are absolutely outraged by this because they were talking about how many people died for the black vote. Now their vote has completely been diminished by kingmakers. And it's refreshing to see that there are people who can see through this. But who are they? How vocal will they be? So let us know what you think of this.
All right, we got more news to get to. We're going to talk about big tech censorship, censoring Donald Trump. You might have gone to Google search results to look for stuff about Donald Trump. You might find that you're rerouted and you're being forced to then watch and read about Kamala Harris. It's unbelievable how big tech is really running our elections. We'll talk about that. Plus, white saviors for civil rights. If you are a white person, the Kamala Harris campaign, you might be able to join a Zoom call to learn how to speak about Kamala Harris more effectively.
Right.
We'll talk about that.
I mean, ethnic minorities, they need you. They can't do it themselves, obviously. This is what's called neo-racism, and it's beautiful to watch. So we're going to talk about that in a second.
But first, if you suffer from daily pain, I need you to listen to this message very carefully. What we know about pain relief is changing forever as we age. Aches and pains are normal, and we are all searching for effective ways to relieve pain without side effects and addiction. Let's be frank, we've all seen the horrors of the opioid crisis pouring across our southern borders. You may even have been affected personally in your family, and that's where a pioneering medical scientist comes in. His name is Clint Winters. You may have seen this world-renowned health expert featured in the national media. He's unveiled a natural pain reliever that's taken the world by storm. Yes, I am talking about Canolidine, which is the 100% drug-free way to get full-body pain relief without dangerous pills. And right now, it's become the go-to pain reliever for over 1 million Americans and hundreds of professional athletes. It's so powerful, it was even named the official pain reliever of the UFC. And those guys know a thing or two about managing pain. And right now, you guys can try this for less than $1 per day. Now, hear me when I say this. Canolidine is absolutely the future of pain relief. So whatever you do, make sure to click on the link below and check out Clint's amazing informative report on how Canolidine is changing lives by providing safe and powerful relief at 1/10 the cost of pain pills. Here's the best part. When you click on the link today, you can access the only Canolidine product in the world for less than $1 per day. Clint has provided this link until midnight tonight, and you guys are days away from beating pain forever. Go to trycono.com/redacted. That's trycono.com/redacted. It's 100% drug free. Trycono.com/redacted.
White people, you are being tapped in to advocate for ethnic minorities, and especially Kamala Harris, but only if you follow some rules about your own white privilege. This was the message over the weekend, and it will continue into the Kamala Harris campaign because they realize they need white voters, but they cannot elevate white voters because we must hate white people, right? Because they are neo-racists. So there was a Zoom call this weekend where over 160,000 white women, American women, met to discuss their favorite thing, which is being an ally of oppressed groups. The meeting was organized by Moms Demand Action, which is a gun safety group with 10 million members. And the video included activists, including podcasters and the singer Pink, also regular voters, people who said they regretted just not doing enough in 2016, the election that put Trump in the White House. So they're going to do something now. And here is what they're going to do. This video went viral over the weekend because it is just so obnoxious that it's almost unbelievable. I'm going to play it for you in its entirety, and then we're going to break it down. Hold on to your butts.
Ariel Fodor, affectionately known as Mrs. Frazzle to her combined audience of over 1.5 million followers, is here to help gentle parent us through this election.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I am so honored to speak today. I am like shaking to just be among such incredible company. We are here because, as if you were here earlier, you've heard BIPOC women have tapped us in as white women to step up, listen, and get involved this election season. This is a really important time, and we all need to use our voices and influence for the greater good. No matter who you are all influencers in some way. So tonight, I'm going to share some do's and don'ts for getting involved in politics online and navigating the toxicity that comes with it. And spoiler alert, as much as the toxicity can come from the outside, it can come from us too. So first, don't isolate yourself. We can do our best work when we're in community together like we are tonight, because the toxic feels smaller when we support each other. But don't make it about yourself. As white women, we need to use our privilege to make positive changes. If you find yourself talking over or speaking for BIPOC individuals, or God forbid, correcting them, just take a beat. And instead, we can put our listening ears on. So do learn from and amplify the voices of those who have been historically marginalized, and use the privilege you have in order to push for systemic change. As white people, we have a lot to learn and unlearn. So do check your blind spots. You are responsible for your algorithm, believe it or not.
So
Get it, everybody?
You could tell she was reading from a script. She wrote that out.
Yeah, and thought that was good. Now, this is very comfortable for me because I don't know if you know this, but I started my TV career on Romper Room when I was 5. This is exactly how you talk to children.
That's what I was going to ask.
Don't know any better.
I was like, how old are the people in this meeting? Because she sounds like she's talking to children.
No, they're all adults. So you want to make sure you want to check your, what did she call them? Bio people?
Okay, so here's what she says is that BIPOC women have tapped us in. BIPOC is an acronym for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. So she's saying that those people are allowing white people to speak. Who exactly from the BIPOC community has tapped in white people? I don't know. Who speaks for all BIPOC women that did this tapping in? I don't know. She says that white women should not otherwise have spoke, but we were given permission to speak, so it's okay.
Oh, we're allowed to speak now?
Right, but only if
only
you
women,
follow
Clayton.
these rules.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, men are coming next. This is coming for you next. I didn't tell you this. That's going to come at the end of this segment. She says that a white person should never, ever correct a person of color. If you find yourself doing that, go sit in the corner for a little bit. Think about what you've done and then come back when you're ready, like a first grader, to stop yourself.
Does she give examples of, like, if a black person is going to make a wrong turn and I want to correct that person? Hey, you're about to drive off a cliff. You're about to make a wrong turn. I don't want you. You shouldn't do that.
No,
I shouldn't correct that person.
No, and in fact,
and also
they're historically marginalized.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
And I was going to say it also excludes the white supremacist Trump supporting black people.
I suppose, yeah. If you see a black person voting for Trump, you can correct that person, I would assume. Now, why, though? What is the rationale behind a person of color cannot be challenged? It's because these women think that a person of color cannot handle having their feelings hurt due to systemic oppression. That is what these compassionate ladies think. So that in and of itself is racist, to think, oh, I'm sorry, person of color, you can't handle any hurt feelings because you're not a strong person. So I can't hurt your feelings or correct you or challenge you in any way or say anything. For instance, there's data that shows that lawmakers in Chicago realized that Hispanic and black men were getting more traffic tickets due to traffic lights in Chicago. And so they said, well, this is oppressive, so we'll take these out so that Hispanic and black men don't have more traffic violations, and then that will be in the name of equality. Well, what happened? More people died from traffic accidents because a stoplight camera is not racist. It was only capturing licenses and drivers, and that's it. And so a lot of these policies where we're saying, oh, this is for equality, it's for the greater good, it's because there's discrepancy, so there must be racism. Well, they're not well thought through, and people get hurt. So what if you were to say, hey, actually, I would like to put those red light cameras back in to protect people of color. No. We can't hurt their feelings.
That's racist.
We can't say things like that.
Like defund the police.
Right, yeah. And in fact, one of the comments on this video caught my attention and was spot on. I warn you, this is not politically correct language, but this Twitter user, ex-user, says, why do progressives treat ethnic minorities like they're this word, our words? And if you notice my comment there actually is research on this if you care to look. A 2018 study from Yale School of Management shows that liberals patronize racial minorities by dumbing down their language in front of them. Conservatives, on the other hand, don't do this. Do you find this research surprising and also not well talked about? Well, why do you think that liberals do this? The study shows that liberals think that minorities cannot possibly be as erudite as they are. So they think they need to be more compassionate and just sort of speak down to them.
Speak to them like at a 5th grade level and slowly.
I mean, you guys are cretins and I'm not.
Hey, black person, is it okay if I slow down my speech a little bit? Will that be, you can understand me better there?
Right.
And then I'm not as offensive to you as a white person?
Yes, exactly.
Can you handle the speed with which I'm speaking?
In Oregon, they were going to lower standards in schools because they're like, the kids just can't understand this. So we have to lower it to the lowest common denominator in order to what? I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah. This is the racism of low expectations.
Yes.
This is what we are seeing being played out. It's racism disguised as compassion, and it's wrong. Also, I lived amongst a lot of liberals when I lived in Essex County, New Jersey, which is one of the wealthiest counties in the country, amongst a lot of white liberal women voters. They don't even talk to ethnic minorities unless they are hiring them to watch their kids or clean their houses. So I absolutely have seen this. That's why this Zoom call is so comfortable for them, because they don't have to actually talk to minorities. They can talk for them. It just shows how competent that they think minorities are on their own. And we'll see this later today when President Biden speaks on the anniversary of the civil rights movement. This is a speech that was delayed in the wake of the Trump attempted assassination. He will do a victory lap for the policies that white leaders put in place to save black people from poverty and oppression. Good for them. Only, did you know that black people made most of that progress themselves? It's not for white people to take a victory lap for. This is part of the research of economist Thomas Sowell. He is very much against, he is a black economist, it's worth noting, who is very much against social handouts for any group because it hinders the progress that the data shows that these groups make on their own. This is a summary of Sowell's findings, and I think that it's worth sharing because If we want to, this is from economist Mark Perry sharing this research. If we wanted to be serious about evidence, we might compare where blacks stood 100 years after the end of slavery and where they stood after 30 years of the liberal welfare state. In other words, we could compare hard evidence on the legacy of slavery with hard evidence on the legacy of liberals. Despite the grand myth that black economic progress began or accelerated with the passage of civil rights laws and war on poverty programs of the 60s, the cold fact is that the poverty rate amongst blacks fell from 87% in 1940 to 47% by 1960. This was before any of those programs began. So black people halved their poverty rate on their own 20 years before the civil rights movements were put into place, but we will see President Biden and the Biden administration take a victory lap for what white people did for blacks. Now, why did that happen? It's pretty obvious if you want to look at the data. Sowell explains that blacks are just as competent as every other racial group. Jews, Italians, and Irish, all of those groups show that the first round of immigrants into the U.S. test low on test scores, but each subsequent generation does better as they culturally assimilate and take advantage of American education and prosperity. And so black people have in fact been doing that themselves. That is before the Democrats decided to turn them into the welfare state, which is what Democratic policies do. So what is the racism behind telling black people that you need all of these programs in order to succeed? It's interesting, right? And conservatives then are saying, actually, they're equal to us. Let's let them. This was one of the things that I think spoke to me the most about Vivek Ramaswamy's speech, is when he said at the RNC, we want for you what we want for ourselves: clean neighborhoods, good education, and prosperity. And that is actually a conservative ethos, but it's not talked about a lot in the press.
Right. So when white people want to defund the police in inner cities or in predominantly black or other areas, and they don't want to defund the police in their neck of the woods, right? It's, what is it called? The other, not in my backyard, or NIMBYs.
Oh, NIMBYs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's okay for all these white liberal women to get together on Zoom calls and talk about defunding the police.
Right.
When you look at what it's actually done to these communities, guess what? Blacks want safer communities.
Right.
Just like white people do.
Yes.
Right? Imagine that.
Yeah.
I know it's shocking. And yes, they want to have the same level and access to the same things that we do.
Right.
Right? And so this should not be a shock, but all these liberal women getting together on Zoom calls.
So what they're saying is that white people are collectively privileged. Well, that's ignoring a lot of the data of some of the poorest communities in the United States. Guess what? Are white in the South. And they pretend that that is not the case so that they can advocate for the other, which they don't have to. The probably the income level, the household income level of the people who attended this Zoom call is quite high, and they're thinking that they're privileged because of their skin color. So I could dismantle white privilege too, but we can do that later, because guess what? The Kamala Harris campaign is now moving on to white male privilege. They will have a meeting much like this in the coming week, and they're calling it a space for white dudes to be honest about their role in history. So they want white men to show up.
Oh, Pete Buttigieg is going to be there.
Yes,
I'll sign up.
Pete Buttigieg, and be honest with themselves about the role that they've played in their nation's history, both good and bad. Be responsible not just for your actions, but every heinous act committed by a white person. They would never ask any other group to do that on behalf of themselves, but okay. So that's what they're going to do. You see that Democrats absolutely want to segregate us by race and divide. And it's interesting. Now, last week, the New York Post published something about black men who are saying, I don't buy this anymore. I'm not going to buy that white people are my enemy. The government is my enemy. So the narrative is breaking down, but they are going to keep pushing this racially segregated world. So let me know, is this white saviorism what's needed? Or is it neo-racism?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What about all the descendants of the white dudes that fought and died in the Civil War to free the slaves?
Screw
like
those
if
guys.
we're a descendant of,
Screw those guys.
That's your white privilege talking.
Yeah.
You better just check yourself.
Right.
Well,
Check
I have
yourself.
another question then.
Slow down.
Because my great grandparents immigrated from on my mother's side, they came from Costa Rica and Guatemala, and on my father's side, they came from Germany at like post-World War. Am I responsible for any of this? Or, I mean, there's the whole German thing might be problematic, but
yeah,
just on the basis of the whiteness, am I responsible for any of this? Even though my family wasn't here for any of it? Okay.
Every day when you wake up, you have to be reminded of your responsibility
because
for this.
Based on your skin color, which you won't show us because Philip never turns on his camera, but
we assume you're white.
Right,
Trust
but
me,
he's
he
the
is
brother
very
of
white.
David, so we're assuming that you have a similar racial profile as David, who we can see on the screen now.
Right.
David is not the victim of microaggressions because of his white male privilege, so he is less prone to having hurt feelings, and so we are assuming based on, I mean, that's racist, right? I'm assuming things based on the way you look. That's neo-racism.
Yep. I amplify it with my white beard, white glasses, white headphones. Like I just really
It's too much white.
My
It's too much
whiteness.
white.
Yeah.
White shirt.
Yeah, you should wear like either wear like a pride watch band to kind of mix it up a little bit, or wear like a Black History Month watch band,
That's a good
show
idea.
that you're like culturally relevant.
No. I'm gonna get a white Dudes for Harris hat. Then I'm done. Then I can wear whatever I want.
Okay, then yeah. So let us know. I mean, I think that this reeks of white saviorism, which is neo-racist, and also, again, it's assuming that people of color are just not capable of speaking for themselves, and they need us as allies based on their skin color. I hate it, but let me know if you see any virtue here that I'm missing. What is it that I don't see? Let us know in the chat. We have more news to get to. We're going to talk about how Google is censoring the upcoming election, as we know they have been for the last, 8 years, and who is going to do anything about it. We also are going to talk about how the Olympics is super woke and is creating just miserable athletes because of their climate goals. But first,
I know we talk a lot about gold and we talk a lot about precious metals and investing. Right now, though, given what President Trump said this past weekend about creating sort of a Fort Knox for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and you're seeing a surge in precious metals because right now when you see the U.S. dollar at almost $35 trillion, our national debt almost at $35 trillion, we are teetering on the edge of destruction for the U.S. dollar. That is why we're such big proponents here of investing in precious metals. But right now, silver, I know we talk a lot about gold, but silver actually is the best kept secret in investing. As our friend Robert Kiyosaki likes to say, everyone can afford to own some silver. And I agree with Robert. And our friends over at Lear Capital have some great information on silver. And you can grab their free silver shortage report right now because we used to have a surplus of silver and now we don't. It's in everything from cars to batteries to electronics. It's both a currency and a commodity. And Natalie and I are big investors in silver as well as gold. But a lot of people sort of always forget about silver. But right now at about $30 an ounce for silver, it's very affordable. So if you've got a couple $100 sitting in your bank account and you know that U.S. dollar is losing value every day thanks to inflation, it's one thing you can do is as a hedge against inflation, moving it over to precious metals. That's a way to protect. And, I like to look at when we invest in silver and gold as a way to hedge and protect our wealth, protect the money that we have. If you have a few $1,000s in savings and you're saving up for your kid's college or whatever it happens to be, and the U.S. dollar is losing value every day in a savings account, having precious metals is a great way to preserve that money, preserve it. Yes, great, it goes up in value. That's not exactly why I'm investing in precious metals. I'm doing it as sort of like a Fort Knox is the plan. So anyway, our friends at Lear Capital can help you get set up right now. Call them. Call their 800 number, 1-800-613-3557 for your free silver shortage guide, or go to LearRedacted.com. Tell them we sent you. They are an American company. They will not be outsourced. You will not call them to like an Indian call center somewhere. They will be talking to you right from America on the phone, if you can imagine that. All right. Well, you might be shocked to learn that big tech is already censoring information about America's presidential race. I know it's shocking. Shock me if you've heard this before. Specifically, posts about Biden's replacement. In the past few days, YouTube has gone after channels that are asking critical questions about the Democratic nominee. The woman who no one voted for, but who is now Biden's replacement. You know her name. The censorship started almost immediately right after Biden announced that he was dropping out of the race. The censorship industrial complex went into overdrive. It was like a coordinated effort. They all started removing videos critical of Harris, blocking comments critical of Harris. Reddit forums right now are alive with all kinds of users posting their experiences about this censorship on YouTube. And remember, Reddit is a liberal paradise. So, this is a place where liberals are going on Reddit to complain about being censored on other platforms. Like, here's an individual who's like, I've been a premium YouTube subscriber for around 7 years now. I'm pretty active in regards to voicing my opinion on various channels. Yet this morning I made a comment simply listing all of Kamala Harris's actions and statements over the past few years, only to have that comment immediately removed and banned for 24 hours due to hate speech. So that's happening. You can read more of those posts on Reddit if you like. Amazon actively removing and censoring books critical of Harris as well. For instance, journalist Caleb Maupin, his book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America, had been up there for 4 years. 4 years. When suddenly, right after Biden steps down, his book gets removed by Amazon. And they reached out to him and said, it's because your cover was problematic. And he had a picture of Kamala Harris on the cover. So then he's like, okay, you know what? I'll make a really generic cover. I think you can look at it here. It's like a picture of like the Aurora Borealis. He's like, all right, I'll find the most generic thing I can do, and I'll just I'll just title it Kamala Harris and the Future of America. There's no picture of her, and they still rejected. He did it multiple times. Rejected. So it's been up there for 4 years. Almost to the day when President Biden steps down and announces he's resigning and he's not going to run for president anymore, suddenly Amazon deletes that book. It's amazing.
That's
it's amazing
wild.
How that works, isn't it? Biden, of course, we know that the Biden administration had pressured Amazon before, right? We covered that here on the show. Specifically on vaccine misinformation, reducing visibility of COVID-related books. So if there were books out there talking about COVID on Amazon, the Biden administration, we now know, thanks to the Twitter files, and other emails, was specifically leaning on Amazon to suppress those books. We know that. And this morning, thanks to the New York Post, we learned that Google's autocomplete feature is censoring information about Donald Trump's assassination attempt. You can't make this up. Michael Kurson also wrote about this. Google memory holes attempted assassination of Trump. So libs of TikTok even pointed this out. Even if you type out the entire word, no results autofill on Google. We're witnessing the erasure of history in real time. Unbelievable. So you type out assassination attempt Trump, and it won't even populate it. So again, Google purports to be the organizer of the internet, right? To give you the most accurate and up-to-date information, and when you need it at a moment's notice. That's Google's mission, right? Also, their mission is do no evil, but we all laugh about that, right?
To Hunter Biden.
Right. Do no evil to Hunter Biden.
I tried that. After I saw that, I went and tried it, and it is true. Like, I had typed in assassination attempt of TRU, and it says Truman, says all these different lists, but then you have to complete Trump, and even when you do, it doesn't finish it, and then you get information. But yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I did it as well. Attorney General Andrew Bailey also did it. He from Missouri. He's on it. Apparently going to be going after Google and looking into this. The Attorney General of Missouri says, I'm on it. So anyway, to David's point, I decided to test it out too. I don't want to just take the words of libs of TikTok. So assassination attempt on. Okay, what do you think would be the most relevant search? Trump doesn't show up. Let's see, on true.
Lenin.
Nope. And then you know what? I went back and then I realized,
Johnson?
I forgot a T. So let me fix that. Okay, attempt on. Now let me make sure I type it out fully. I'm just going to type it out fully here. Make sure that I'm not screwing anything up. All right. Assassination attempt on. Nope. No Trump. No Trump. On Truman. Who's looking up an assassination attempt on Truman right now? No one. Or President Human. President Reagan? Gerald Ford? No. So there you go. Elon Musk tweeted, well, there's probably a reason why that's the case, because Alphabet is donations, probably just a coincidence that Alphabet Google employees were the top donors to President Biden. It's kind of shocking, isn't it, when you think about it? I'm sure it's just a bug, as Blue in our chat just says, yep, I'm sure it's just a bug. Also, Elon Musk tweeted this just a short time ago. Also, Google searches. So that's like full-on searches. Now search for Donald Trump. When you search for Donald Trump, what do you get? You get news about Harris. You can't make this up. Really? Type in Donald Trump. I would probably want to get information about Donald Trump. Instead, Google wants you to see information about Harris. They just want to shove it right in your face. Shove it right in your face. It's unbelievable.
And only smiling, flattering pictures of her as well.
No cackling videos,
smiling,
nothing like that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Alexa, which is Amazon's voice-activated assistant that might be on your Echo One or Echo Show or whatever that you might have sitting in your house. So here's an example of asking for information about the assassination of Trump on your Alexa device from Amazon. Watch.
Alexa, what can you tell me about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, what can you tell me about the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan?
On March 30th, 1981, President of the United States Ronald Reagan was shot and wounded by John Hinckley Jr. in Washington, D.C., as he was returning to his limousine after a speaking engagement at the Washington Hilton.
That's interesting.
Okay. Thanks, Alexa, for the most accurate and up-to-date information about that. And of course, again, you have Google searches that are doing the same. Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook, Instagram also censoring photos. So, not to be outdone, Mark Zuckerberg getting in on this. Jack Prosovic tweeting this just a few minutes ago. Breaking, Meta is now censoring actual photos of the Trump assassination attempt. So the actual photo of him pumping his hand in the air with blood on his face, now good luck sharing that across Instagram and Facebook. Now, a Facebook employee or Meta employee did respond saying, "Oh, we got some false positives from some AI images that were similar, so that's why it was giving us a false positive. It's been corrected now." Okay, sure. And a lot of people questioning this in the comments, which is, do you guys ever make a mistake on the other side? It always seems to be that you're making the mistake on this side of things, but it's never in the reverse.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Philip.
So from what I understand, because I haven't been on Facebook in 4 or 5 years, but I see people mention that it's become an AI-generated hellscape. Basically every image is AI, but this one, they're like, oh, we thought it might be AI. Do they not?
Right.
Do they not
this one
look at their own platform?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, just this one is the problematic one. They don't want you seeing this sort of triumphant fight picture of the president with blood on his face. Yeah, that'll be blocked. So you wonder then, well, how is Kamala Harris's campaign, getting off the ground? Well, there's a lot of help right now. Of course, you're getting all the big tech censorship, but now this is interesting. Laura Loomer tweeted this a short time ago and broke this story. Launch Viral is a company that you would hire for influencer campaigns. And guess what? The Kamala Harris campaign apparently has hired Launch Viral. So they will hire basically fake social media engagement. So our agency brings viral influencers and social media firepower to businesses. It's a paid post opportunity. We're offering $150 paid cash incentives as a small token of appreciation for those who are selected. Then we encourage your fans to share, like, and follow Kamala. So they're paying for fake followers. And on Instagram and Facebook,
right,
and on
influencer
social media
campaigns.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I dug into this Launch Viral website, Launch Viral company. What's interesting, if you go to launchviral.com, you can't take any action on the website at all. You're just met with a flat page on the website. There's no bar to click on, nothing. So you literally have to do a sort of a search to try to find sub pages of this website. I don't know if they're blocking it right now or what. Something fishy is going on with this company. Anyway, the CEO, the founder, is all over LinkedIn. You're able to find information about the company's founder, one of the co-founders, Rick Shermer. And he posts this on LinkedIn, talks all about his life. He's like, I'm like Elon Musk. I'm a free speech advocate. My company, Launch Viral Influence, specializes in influencer marketing. He's been a pioneer. But you'll notice here, if you scroll down, he said, he talks about influencers are typically paid or receive something of value for their posts, and they are required to disclose this to their audience. He also says, though, in the case of politics, influencers need to make it abundantly clear who is paying for the sponsored content. So, all right, it'll be interesting to see, will these influencers, under the law, post that this is an ad? Anytime they say something effusive about Kamala Harris, they talk about Kamala Harris, they're retweeting Kamala Harris, they're posting pictures of Kamala, they're sharing, they're going to have to put ad. According to the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, they have to put that there. This is a sponsored post. All of these individuals who are being paid to support Kamala are going to have to show that they've taken money from the Kamala Harris campaign under the law. Otherwise, that's illegal.
Yeah.
Right? According to the CEO of Launch Viral.
All right. Well, let's see what cool dude says that.
Yeah.
The last I checked, election interference is illegal as well. So if they're not saying ad, they're doing that. And if they say ad, they're still doing that. So
yeah.
But I will say this. Yes, please, if you see an ad that pops up here on when you're watching one of our YouTube videos and it's an ad for Kamala Harris, please watch the full ad.
Yeah.
And watch the full ad.
Then she's paying Redacted. I mean, mostly she's paying YouTube, right? But at least it's like
YouTube, really.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just, it's a little spiteful, a little bit. Yeah, but like, you paid for me to watch it. I'm going to watch it, girl. But there's not much you can do to get my vote, but okay, do that. So anyway,
we have more news to get to here.
We do indeed. So we're going to talk about the Olympics. Are you ready to talk about the Olympics? Do you need a stretch first? Okay.
I need a pirouette. What is it called?
A pirouette?
Deep knee.
You need to stick to landing?
Yeah, I need to stick to landing.
A baguette?
A baguette. I need a baguette.
All right. Well, the Paris Olympics is a hot mess for the IOC. That's the International Olympic Committee. And it's a shame because a lot of these athletes are not being properly respected, that they've spent their entire lives training for the privilege of competing for their country. And now they are stuck in a Parisian hell. It's not just the offensive nature of the opening ceremony, which we'll get to. It's also these woke policies that have made it a hell for them and hard for us to watch. Now, this is an excellent example of progressive policies gone wrong because no one bothered to study. The Paris Games, the organizers said that they wanted this to be the most sustainable games ever. They threw around words like plant-based and green and sustainable, and now they're all living in hell. So first off, the food. Athletes may have thought that, ooh, I'm going to Paris. Parisians pioneered haute cuisine. Maybe I'll eat some awesome food. No, in fact, they're not even eating food, period, because there are shortages. The athletes are starving because the organizers had tried to offer a 1/3 plant-based menu, and elite athletes mostly don't want that. They are now having to ration meat and eggs because they're in such high demand. You'd think anyone who studies the nutrition of elite athletes would already know this, but I guess they didn't. The British team had to hire an extra cook for their team and put the cook in their team headquarters and say, we're not going to eat in the Olympic Village. It's just insufficient. The German national field hockey team called the food a disaster. Now, also, the organizers said, in the name of the planet, we are going to forego air conditioning because air conditioning is not green, according to them. Here's how that went.
Why did Paris said they are not providing AC for athletes during this Summer Olympics? So here's the scoop. Paris wants to host the greenest ever games, which means no air conditioning in the athletes' complex. Yep, you heard that right. No AC. Instead, they're using a fancy water pipe system under the floors to keep things cool. But wait, Paris had record-breaking heat waves last summer, and it's one of Europe's hottest cities. Over 5,000 people died from extreme heat in France last year. The plan is to keep rooms between 73 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit and provide fans. Sounds like a sauna, right? Well, the USA ain't sweating it. Sarah Hirschland, CEO of the USA Paralympic and Olympic Committee, announced that Team USA will bring their own air conditioning units. She respects the sustainability focus, but keeping athletes cool is a top priority.
Now, aren't these the same people that are always telling us how dangerous heat is, how people are going to die of extreme heat waves due to global warming, and that we need to adapt, but they're A-okay with just putting athletes in a sauna where they can't properly sleep because they'll be so hot? It's going to be 94 degrees Fahrenheit in Paris tomorrow.
You can't push that agenda if you're not going to make them feel the heat of global warming.
I suppose you're right. Yeah, good point. Now, also, organizers did these recyclable beds made of cardboard, which the athletes say are terrible. Take a look at that. That's a cardboard bed with some kind of like sustainable foaming. Now, you don't have to look very hard on social media to find athletes saying this is uncomfortable and terrible. U.S. gymnast Frederick Richards said he gave up and he actually ordered a real bed to be shipped to him because he couldn't handle it for the few weeks of the Olympics.
You know I would do the damn same thing.
Yeah.
I show up, there's a cardboard bed, I'm going to fall right through it. No frickin' way.
Amazon to the rescue.
I don't know if you know this or not, but that's actually dual purpose, that bed, because those cardboard beds are also to discourage the creation of
athletes.
Brand new Olympians, if you know what I mean.
From procreating.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, that's another reason why I'd get rid of that bed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No way.
Well, the U.S. men's basketball team said, forget this, and they all decided to stay at a hotel collectively at a cost of $15 million. So that wipes out the sustainability when you have a whole team now getting hotel rooms with air conditioning and proper beds. Now, Joel Embiid of the Olympic team is 7 feet tall. There is no way that this guy is going to sleep on a cardboard bed. Now, I know the French don't have a reputation for being hospitable to foreign travelers, but even the most reasonable amongst them would know that it's rude to ask a guy like that to sleep on a cardboard bed. Now, athletes also say that the Olympic Games green transportation is a huge pain. Here is from Olympics.com, where they promised athletes that the shuttles to their events would be sustainable. They were supposed to be able to depend on this app to get them around to their events using sustainable transportation. Athletes are saying that's not working either. The French daily Le Parisien said that organizers are scrambling to improve transportation because it's just not working. Athletes are saying there's terrible delays. 6 swimmers from the South Korean team decided to just move out of the Olympic Village and get a hotel nearby because they said their shuttle rides, which were promised to be 45 minutes, were 2 hours. So they said, forget it. We can't rely on green transportation. We're going to get a hotel nearby and walk to our pool. Again, this is exactly what green researchers have been saying all along about green policies. You got to do the math first before you just throw around woke words like plant-based or sustainability. And they will never work when you ask people to go with less. Green policies will only succeed with innovation to make the life we already know easier, not asking people to give up comforts. And finally, the opening ceremony that featured, the Horsemen of the Apocalypse and drag performers mocking Christianity. Well, now organizers have apologized for the offense. Videos of the full ceremony continue to be censored online. They've been removed because the IOC has been using copyright violations to just pretend that never happened. But they did issue what we call in my house a BS apology. You know, when you say like, apologize to your sister, and then that person apologizes, but they don't mean it. This is a BS apology from the IOC saying they're not really sorry they did it. They're sorry you were upset.
Clearly, there was never an intention to show disrespect to any religious group. On the contrary, I think that Thomas Joly really tried to really intend to celebrate community tolerance. That was his word yesterday. And looking at the result of the polls that we shared, we believe that this ambition was achieved. If people have taken any offense, we are of course really sorry.
Ma volonté n'est pas d'être subversif ni de me moquer.
I'm sorry, I meant to cut him out. So she's not saying she's sorry that it was offensive. She's saying she's sorry if you were offended. And they brought their own polls to show us that people were not offended. So if you are, you're outside of the majority. And in fact, look at the press saying that anyone who was offended is right-wing or a far-right politician. So already making excuses for how, you might feel this way, but if you feel this way, you're in a hate group. So don't feel this way. Love it.
You're planning on doing a mockery of the Last Supper. It is intentional. It's not like you slipped and fell and accidentally put on a show about the Last Supper. Like you planned this for months ahead of with a team and television cameras.
That kind of looked like the Last Supper. Oh yeah, well it did, didn't it? Like whoopsie.
You know what? I didn't even notice that. Thanks for pointing that out. Yes.
I don't know. I mean, maybe can we put up just that video again, but play it without sound? Is that possible? Now, people are saying that the Paris Olympic flame looks kind of like the haircut of Mary J. Blige, and nobody noticed that. So that kind of was accidental. The like flame haircut. Sorry, I put
Which one are you talking about?
So if you put up this lady apologizing here, take a look at the placard in front of her. The flame looks like a Mary J. Blige haircut, the above Paris 2024. And nobody noticed that. They just didn't have a graphic designer like, oops, that does look like Mary J. Blige. Google that later or search that later. It's kind of funny. So maybe they didn't notice that. But they intentionally put an obese queer lady as Jesus, a Jewish obese queer lady as Jesus, and said, oh, we did not mean to offend. Like they just didn't think it through, right? Now, this is
just really quick, has it been confirmed that it was the Last Supper? Because I've also seen people saying it was the final feast of Dionysus, which is basically the same story, but different. It's Greek.
Various athletes have said that. And actually, the woman who played Jesus confirmed it on Instagram and said she is a queer, obese, Jewish Jesus. She said that, so it was her intention. Different French outlets have said that that's the case, but the blue guy was Dionysus. I mean, does it matter if you're, trying to unite the world, but also doing so with divisive imagery? That's really important to Christians. Maybe it's important to be sensitive to everybody. Now, again, the way the press is covering this is kind of an amazing flex on defending France and also woke culture and gay perversion is what I want to call it, because it's not representative of normal homosexuality by any means, but they're doing so. But when you juxtapose this and realize how much the media 10 years ago took the piss out of Russia when they hosted the Sochi Games, this was from a 2014 article in The Nation that pointed out how the media and President Obama himself actually took every opportunity to dump on Russia during the Olympic Games. For what was otherwise a well-done Olympic hosting. The opening ceremony was beautiful, offended nobody.
They had clothes on.
It celebrated Russian culture, and the athletes experienced comfort and hospitality in Russian modernity. But the press still took daily dirty shots at Putin. So now consider how the media is protecting France for this utter, I was going to say, cock-up, for lack of a better word, and not admitting that no one did the math for green policies. But France will get a chance to embarrass themselves all over again in 2030 because they have just been named the host of the Winter Games in the French Alps. So I hope they get the climate control thing under wraps, because did you know that 7 times more people die of cold than heat every year? So those athletes are going to freeze if they keep this shit up. So let us know what you think. Are you watching the games? Again, I'm not one for cancel culture, and I hate to boycott the games because these athletes worked so hard. I'm not even touching on the neutral athletes from Belarus and Russia. I mean, it is a woke mess, but let us know what you think. If there's anything, you find inspiring that you're still watching, I want to know.
Yeah, a lot of people in our chat saying absolutely not watching. Absolutely not watching. But again, I come back to the athletes. Yeah, I mean, I used to watch water polo. I played water polo, so I like to watch the Summer Olympics water polo teams and stuff like that. And I like Winter Olympics. I like watching the skiing, but I can't watch any of these ceremonies. They just make my skin crawl.
Well, this one in particular. So let us know what you think. That's going to do it for us today. I can wrap the show if you want me to.
Yeah, tell them about the store, please.
Okay. You can head on over to Redacted Store if you'd like to see how you'd like to support the show and tell other people that you like Redacted. We appreciate it if you do. You can head on over to redactedstore.com. You can buy t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and stickers. And signal that you're part of the Redacted Rebellion. We really appreciate it. Once again, that's redactedstore.com. All right, guys, that's it for our Monday. We'll be here all week, though, so come back tomorrow, same time, 4 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for joining us today, everybody.